Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to have you all here with us today. We're going to dive into a fun and flavorful conversation. So grab a snack and let's get started. So, I was prepping for this big dinner party I hosted recently. One of my favorite things to do, of course. I was making a batch of my signature fish tacos, which just wouldn't be complete without a fresh batch of Pico de Gallo. But as I was getting everything ready, I realized I was completely out of Pico de Gallo. It's one of those things I'd always have on hand, so you can imagine my surprise. For those of you who might not know, Pico de Gallo is a type of fresh salsa made with chopped tomatoes, onions, cilantro, jalapeños, and lime juice. It's incredibly popular here in New York, especially for adding a zesty, refreshing touch to all kinds of dishes. I use it not just for tacos, but also on grilled chicken, as a topping for eggs, or even as a snack with some good tortilla chips. This particular dinner was for a group of friends, and I wanted everything to be just right. Pico de Gallo adds such a burst of freshness, especially to something like fish tacos, where the flavors really need to balance well. So, realizing I didn't have it on hand was quite the hiccup. Instead of panicking, I decided to get creative. I had some cherry tomatoes, which are sweeter and less juicy than regular tomatoes, so I chopped them up finely. Then I found a leftover grilled corn cob in the fridge and cut the kernels off to add a bit of texture and sweetness. For the kick, I had pickled jalapeños, different from fresh ones, but still packed with flavor. I mixed all of these with some finely diced red onions, a good handful of chopped cilantro, and a squeeze of lime juice. The result wasn't exactly Pico de Gallo, but it was a vibrant, slightly sweet, and tangy salsa that complemented the fish tacos perfectly. The guests loved it, and some even asked for the recipe, thinking it was something entirely new. It just goes to show that sometimes a little improvisation can lead to something unexpectedly delightful.
Wow, Chloe, that sounds incredible. I love how you turned a potential disaster into something new and exciting. I'm curious though, did you miss the classic Pico de Gallo flavor, or did your improvised version hit the spot in a different way?
Great question, Maya. Honestly, while I did miss the classic Pico de Gallo's straightforward freshness, the new version brought its own unique twist. The sweetness from the corn and the tang from the pickled jalapeños gave the dish a different, but equally satisfying flavor profile.
Chloe, I'm so impressed by your creativity. Did you have any other ideas in mind before you decided on the corn and pickled jalapeños?
Thanks, Sarah. I briefly considered using some diced mango for a fruitier salsa, but I thought the corn would blend better with the other ingredients in the tacos.
Your dish sounds so delicious. Chloe, what's your favorite part about experimenting in the kitchen, especially when you're faced with challenges like this?
I think it's the thrill of discovering something new, Jennifer. There's something so satisfying about taking what you have and making it work. Sometimes it even turns out better than the original plan.
I absolutely love the idea of adding corn to a salsa like that, Chloe. Do you think you'll make this version again, or was it a one-time thing?
Thanks, Emily. I've actually made it a couple of times since then. It's become a bit of a go-to, but I want something a little different from the usual Pico de Gallo.
I completely agree with you, Chloe. Sometimes improvisation leads to the best dishes. When I buy Pico de Gallo, I'd always check the texture. I like my Pico de Gallo to have a bit of crunch, so I look for pieces that are chopped evenly and not too watery. In Washington, we have a lot of fresh produce, so I'm pretty picky about that.
That's a great point, Emily. For me, the freshness of the ingredients is key. In California, we're lucky to have access to some of the best tomatoes, onions, and cilantro, so I make sure the Pico de Gallo I buy is made from the freshest produce possible. If the tomatoes aren't ripe, it just doesn't taste right.
I'm with you both on that. Another thing to consider is the balance of flavors. Here in Texas, we love a good kick in our Pico de Gallo, so I always taste it first to make sure it's got the right amount of jalapeños without overpowering the other flavors.
I totally agree, Jennifer. For me, it's all about the cilantro. I think it makes or breaks Pico de Gallo. In Florida, we get really fresh cilantro almost year-round, so I look for pico that has a good, strong cilantro flavor. If it's too faint, I know it won't have that bright, herby taste that I love.
Those are all great points. Another thing I look at is the acidity. The lime juice is what brings everything together. And in New York, I notice that some store-bought Pico de Gallo can be a bit lacking in that department. I always make sure it's got that zesty kick, or I'll add extra lime juice myself.
When I can't find Pico de Gallo, I sometimes use the chunky salsa instead. In California, we have some amazing salsa varieties with fresh ingredients, so it's an easy swap. But I do miss the brightness that fresh Pico de Gallo brings.
In Texas, I often use guacamole as an alternative. It's not the same, but it adds a creamy texture that works well with a lot of dishes where I'd normally use pico. Plus, the flavors of lime and cilantro are still there.
I love that idea, Jennifer. Here in Florida, I sometimes use the mango salsa as an alternative. It's sweeter and fruitier than Pico de Gallo, but it pairs beautifully with seafood dishes, which are so common here.
In Washington, I'd often turn to a good homemade relish if I can't find Pico de Gallo. It's a bit more tangy and has a different texture, but it's made with fresh vegetables and adds a nice bite to whatever I'm making.
Those all sound like great alternatives. In New York, I sometimes use a diced tomato and onion salad with a splash of vinegar. It's not quite the same as Pico de Gallo, but it still gives you that fresh, tangy bite that complements a lot of dishes. I think we've covered some fantastic ground today. We've talked about the importance of freshness, texture, flavor balance, cilantro, and acidity when choosing Pico de Gallo. And we've also explored some creative alternatives like chunky salsa, guacamole, mango salsa, relish, and a simple tomato and onion salad. Thank you all for your amazing insights. I've learned so much, and I'm sure our viewers have too. And with that, we're wrapping up today's conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed our discussion as much as we did. See you next time and happy cooking!